The proximity alarm echoed across the deck of the VXN-447 reconnaissance vessel, a sharp sound that sliced through the comfortable silence of the routine patrol. Commander Thexalar lifted 3 of his 4 eyes from the holographic displays floating before him, his auditory membranes vibrating with irritation. In 42 orbital cycles serving the Galactic Council reconnaissance fleet, rarely had anything managed to disturb him. "Report," he ordered, his voice producing soft harmonics through the universal translators scattered across the bridge. Around him, the crew of 17 individuals from 6 different species worked at ergonomic stations, each adapted to the particular physiology of its occupants. The sensor officer, a young Keithrax named Vess, quickly adjusted her controls. Her delicate claws danced over the neural interface panels. Massive energy signatures detected in Sector 771 Epsilon, Commander. Readings indicate industrial-scale fusion activity and radiation emissions characteristic of warp drives. Thexalar felt a ripple of curiosity run across his translucent skin. Sector 771 Epsilon was territory catalogued as a primitive development zone. According to the most recent records, admittedly outdated by 200 cycles, the dominant local species had barely managed to launch chemical satellites beyond their own atmosphere. "Impossible," muttered the second-in-command, Officer Artham, an imposing Veldari whose chitinous carapace gleamed under the bridge's bluish lighting. The last reports classified the local inhabitants as technology level 2.4. They didn't even possess antimatter propulsion. "The reports are 2 centuries old," Vess noted, her antennae twitching. "But even so, normal progression would take at least 1,000 cycles to reach this level of energy emissions." Thexalar mentally accessed the database through his neural implant. Holograms materialized before him, showing grainy images of a blue and green planet, predominantly covered by water. Earth, local designation. Inhabitants, humans, carbon-based bipeds, sexual reproduction, life expectancy of approximately 100 local orbital cycles. Fossil, fuel technology and primitive nuclear fission. "Vess, refine the sensors. I want precise identification," he ordered. An uncomfortable sensation began to form in his upper digestive chambers. Something was wrong. The Kithrax worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. The main bridge screen zoomed in, revealing increasingly detailed data. When the final numbers stabilized, a heavy silence descended upon the bridge. "Commander," Vess's voice came out shaky, "I detect 47 distinct ship signatures. Capital class. Estimated displacement between 500,000 and 2 million metric tons each. Active antimatter containment fields. Perfect tactical formations. Sentry rotation every 120 seconds. They are patrolling." The silence deepened. Thexalar felt his blood temperature drop a few degrees. A fleet of that size represented enough firepower to vitrify the surface of a medium-sized planet. No Level 2 civilization possessed the capacity to even imagine such an arsenal. "Confirm again," he said, keeping his voice steady through sheer training. 47 ships? "Confirmed, Commander. And there's more. Detecting orbital structures, large-scale space stations, construction platforms, defense webs with, for the love of the first ones, those are accelerated particle cannons. Hundreds of them." Artham turned abruptly. "Commander, I recommend immediate withdrawal. Whatever species we monitored in the past clearly no longer exists. This could be an occupation force from some uncatalogued power. It was the sensible decision. Logic dictated retreat, reporting to the Council, and letting diplomats and strategists handle the situation. But Thexalar hadn't reached the position of reconnaissance fleet commander by following only logic. Curiosity was what separated good officers from excellent explorers. "Negative," he replied. "Activate quantum stealth fields on all 6 ships. We will approach for visual reconnaissance. Maintain communication in silent mode." Vess hesitated only a moment before executing the orders. Through the bridge's viewing windows, space seemingly remained unchanged. But Thexalar knew that at that exact moment, dimensional distortion fields enveloped every ship in the fleet. The technology bent light around the hulls, redirected heat emissions to alternate dimensions, and masked gravitational signatures. It was the pinnacle of 100,000 cycles of scientific development. No known civilization possessed sensors capable of penetrating quantum stealth. The 6 ships slid silently through the vacuum, approaching the perimeter of the unknown fleet. As the distance decreased, details began to emerge on the high-resolution screens. The ships were brutal in their simplicity. None of the organic curves favored by the Veldari or the fractal geometries of the Cuthrax. These were angular shapes, overlapping armor plates, obvious weapon protrusions on every surface, dark gray, almost black, with white and red markings. Each ship seemed designed with a single purpose: war. "Spectroscopic analysis of the hulls," Thexalar ordered. "Tungsten carbide alloys with nanocomposite matrix," Vess replied, her voice laced with disbelief. "Regenerative ablative coating. Commander, these shields could withstand relativistic projectile impacts." "Impossible for a level 2 civilization," Artham murmured. "More than that," Vess continued, zooming in on the image of one of the larger ships. "I'm detecting gravitational field generators, point defense, arrays, and this can't be right. Are those neurally guided antimatter missile launchers?" The ship in question was nearly 2 miles long. Its silhouette vaguely resembled the ancient aquatic warships that some primitive species built before mastering spaceflight. But while those vessels were powered by steam and chemical fuels, this was a manifestation of technological power that rivaled the Council's own first-line fleets. "Approach closer," Thexalar ordered, unable to contain his fascination. "I want to read the identification markings." The reconnaissance ships slid nearer, maintaining a dispersed formation. It was then that Thexalar saw the letters painted on the hull of the flagship, symbols in basic human alphabet, characters that the universal translators instantly interpreted. Un's Indomitable, DD 1047. Below an emblem, a blue and green planet, encircled by olive branches and crossed arrows. The words around it read, "United Nations Space Command, peace through strength." "Commander," Vess's voice was tense, "the ships are changing position." Thexalar focused his attention on the tactical screens. His blood ran cold. All 47 ships simultaneously began to rotate. It was not a random or casual maneuver. It was precise, calculated, and absolutely coordinated. Within 15 seconds, every ship had reoriented its bow directly toward the 6 invisible Council ships. "Evasive!" Thexalar shouted, but before any pilot could react, all communication stations in the fleet exploded with activity. A voice filled all simultaneous channels, speaking in perfect standard galactic. With only a slight accent, that Thexalar couldn't identify. Attention, unidentified vessels operating in sovereign Earth space. You have been detected, tracked, and are currently targeted by weapons systems. Your stealth capabilities do not function against our quantum sensing technology. You have 30 seconds to deactivate distortion fields, transmit identification codes, and prepare for boarding. Resistance will be interpreted as hostility. This is your only warning. Thexalar's universe collapsed. 42 cycles of absolute certainties evaporated in that moment. Quantum stealth fields were impenetrable. They were the technological advantage that guaranteed the Council's supremacy in intelligence operations. No species had ever detected them, until now. Commander, Rhythm was waiting for orders, his mandibles trembling with anxiety. Thexalar looked at the screens. 47 warships, hundreds of weapon platforms, space stations the size of small moons, and somewhere beyond all that, an entire planet of beings who had achieved the impossible. For the first time in his long career, Commander Thexalar faced genuine fear. 15 seconds, the human voice announced, calm and relentless as the vacuum around them. Thexalar forced his respiratory membranes to function at a controlled rhythm. Panic was unacceptable. He hadn't survived 4 decades exploring the far reaches of the galaxy by yielding to fear. His claws danced over the communication controls. "Deactivate stealth fields," he ordered, his voice surprisingly firm. "Transmit our Council identification codes. All ships, maintain position, and await." "Commander, is this protocol?" Rhythm protested, his carapace shifting to agitated orange tones. "Revealing our Council affiliation could be interpreted as our only chance of survival." Thexalar interrupted. "Execute." Around the small fleet, the dimensional distortion fields collapsed in cascades of exotic particles. The 6 Council ships materialized in real space, their elegant organic hulls contrasting brutally with the angular human fortresses. For a moment, nothing happened. Only the silence of the vacuum and the distant glow of indifferent stars. Then, the transmission returned. This time, accompanied by precise coordinates and navigation instructions. Identification confirmed. Galactic Council Reconnaissance Fleet. Designation VXN-447 and auxiliaries. You are cleared to approach the flagship UNS Indomitable for diplomatic conference. Maintain subsonic speed. Weapon systems deactivated. Attempts to flee or evasive maneuvers will result in immediate system suppression. Welcome to Terran space. Vess let out a sharp sound of disbelief. "Commander, they knew exactly how many ships we had. They knew our designation. How is this possible?" "I don't know," Thexalar admitted, programming the approach coordinates. "But we are going to find out." The journey to the Indomitable lasted 17 agonizing minutes. Throughout the route, Thexalar observed the human fleet with growing apprehension. The ships maintained absolute discipline, patrol rotations executed with clockwork precision. Passive sensors picked up fragments of internal communications, all in military codes that the Council computers couldn't fully decipher. But what most disturbed Thexalar was a small craft that occasionally zipped between the giants, fighters, he presumed, single- or two-seater vehicles, tiny compared to the capital ships, but moving with speeds and accelerations that should pulverize any organic life form inside them. "Analyze the acceleration of those interceptors," he ordered. Vess worked quickly. "Commander, I'm registering sustained accelerations of up to 12 Gs. with peaks of 16 Gs in evasive maneuvers. No known species can withstand that without level 6 or higher inertial dampening technology. Perhaps they are drones, Atham suggested. Negative. Vess pointed to the magnified screen. Detecting biological signatures, there are living beings inside those capsules. Thexala swallowed hard. Human physiology in the ancient records suggested nothing exceptional. They were not particularly strong like the Veldari, nor did they possess the agility of the Kithrax. How then did they withstand forces that would crush most known species? The Indomitable grew on the viewing screens, dominating the entire field of vision. Up close, the ship was even more intimidating. Every square inch of the hull seemed to have a military purpose. Weapon turrets tracked their approach with fluid movements. Hangar doors, the size of buildings, began to open, revealing interiors illuminated by intense white lights. Fleet VXN 447, you are cleared to dock in Main Hangar Alpha. Decontamination procedures will be applied. Prepare your crews for diplomatic reception. The 6 council ships slid into the hangar, a structure so vast it could house a small city. Atmospheric containment fields sealed the entrances, and Thexala felt the slight vibration as artificial gravity generators activated, gently pulling the ships onto designated docking platforms. Through the viewing windows, he observed the hangar with experienced eyes. It was organized with brutal military efficiency. Rows of smaller fighters were lined up in maintenance bays. Teams of technicians, all wearing uniform jumpsuits, moved with purpose among the equipment. Robotic forklifts transported containers marked with warning symbols in dozens of languages. Commander, Vess drew his attention to a specific section of the hangar. Are those combat armors? Thexala focused where she indicated. Rows of mechanical exoskeletons were arranged on storage racks. Each measured approximately 8 feet tall, covered with composite armor plating. Integrated weapons were visible at various points on the armor. Heavy infantry, Ratham murmured. Commander, how long do the records say has passed since the last contact with this species? 200 local orbital cycles, Thexala replied. Why? Because this fleet, this technology, represents development that should take millennia, not decades. The VXN 447's landing ramp opened with a hiss of atmospheric equalization. Thexala inhaled deeply, checked that his commander's insignia were properly positioned, and descended to meet his hosts. A contingent of humans awaited on the hangar deck. Thexala had his first direct view of the species, and he had to recalibrate his expectations again. They were smaller than he expected, most barely exceeding 6 feet in height. Comparatively frail bodies, without protective carapaces or natural claws. Skin in shades of light and dark brown. Hair covering varying in color and length. But it was the eyes that disturbed him. Human eyes were small compared to his own, but they focused with predatory intensity. Every soldier present tracked every movement of the alien crew with calculated precision. Hands rested near, but not on, holstered weapons. The human at the front of the group stepped forward. It was a female, Thexala determined by the biological markers, with dark brown skin and black hair tied in complex braids. Her insignia indicated high military rank. Commander Thexala, she said in perfect galactic, though with that peculiar accent. I am Admiral Sarah Chen. Commander of the Solar System's 3rd Defense Fleet. Welcome aboard the Indomitable. Please accompany me. There is much to discuss." Her fluency in the galactic language was too perfect. There was no translation hesitation, no pause for neural processing. She spoke as if she had used that language all her life. "Admiral Chen," Thexelar replied, executing the Council's traditional salute gesture. "I appreciate your hospitality. I must admit, your detection of our ships was unexpected. Quantum stealth fields are considered impermeable." A smile touched the Admiral's lips, but didn't reach her eyes. "Considered by whom, Commander? Come, we will walk as we talk." The human escort formed around the alien group, not in a threatening manner, but with clear tactical competence. Thexelar noticed that each soldier carried multiple weapons. Some he recognized as conventional chemical projectile launchers, others whose purpose he couldn't determine. Corridors stretched in all directions, all marked with signage in human language and standard galactic symbols. The lighting was more intense than comfortable for Thexelar's eyes, but he forced himself not to show discomfort. 15 years ago, Admiral Chen began as they walked, one of your automated reconnaissance probes was detected crossing the outer limit of our system. We captured it intact. Thexelar felt his digestive organs contract. Impossible. Probes are programmed for self-destruction if compromised. Compromised by conventional methods, yes, Chen agreed, but we discovered that if you freeze all systems simultaneously using directed quantum suppression, the self-destruction protocols are never initiated. She looked at him with those predatory eyes. "It was ingenious of you to include so much information inside that small probe. Council communication frequencies, identification protocols, approximate location of 17 member systems, and most usefully, complete samples of the quantum stealth technology." The corridor seemed to be spinning. "You reverse-engineered it?" "In 7 months, Chen confirmed. Then we spent the next 5 years perfecting not only stealth fields, but methods to detect them. After all, if you had this technology, other species probably would too." Rhythm couldn't contain himself. 5 years. That is theoretically impossible. Our best scientists took generations to develop the initial theory, I understand. Chen interrupted gently. "But you had the disadvantage of not knowing it was possible. We had a functional model, and we had motivation." "Motivation?" Thexelar repeated. Chen stopped before a large security door. She placed her hand on a biometric scanner, and the massive doors began to open. "Commander, when we discovered we were not alone in the universe, and that advanced civilizations were observing us without our knowledge or consent, we faced a choice. We could wait for your intentions to be peaceful, or we could prepare for the worst." The doors opened completely, revealing what lay beyond. Thexelar felt all his extremities go numb. It was a strategic command center, a room the size of a sports field. 3-dimensional holograms filled the space, showing star systems, patrol routes, fleet dispositions. Hundreds of human operators worked at stations, coordinating operations across distances that would make the Council proud. But what stole the oxygen from his respiratory chambers was the central hologram. It was a massive-scale galactic map, and scattered across it, blinking red, were thousands of dots. Each red marker, Chen explained calmly, represents a quantum suppression device we have secretly installed over the past 10 years, in commercial space stations, on uninhabited asteroids, in camouflaged probes, orbiting Council member worlds. If the Council decides that humanity represents a threat to be eliminated, these devices will be activated simultaneously. And then, Thexalar managed to whisper. Admiral Sarah Chen met his gaze with absolute seriousness. Then, all advanced technology in the galaxy stops working, and we find out who really knows how to survive when the conveniences of civilization disappear. The silence that followed Chen's revelation was so dense that Thexalar could hear the hum of the ship's life support systems. His mind, trained through decades to process complex information and evaluate strategic threats, struggled to grasp the magnitude of what he was witnessing. Thousands of devices, scattered throughout the known galaxy, a kill switch for interstellar civilization. Artham stepped forward, his carapace now displaying red alarm patterns. This is an act of war. You infiltrated the sovereign territory of hundreds of species without authorization, planted weapons of mass destruction, and now openly threaten us. They are not weapons of destruction, Chen corrected, her voice maintaining that calm, measured tone that was somehow more disturbing than anger would have been. Mass destruction implies mass deaths. Our suppression devices don't kill anyone. They simply equalize the playing field. Equalize? Vess let out a hysterical laugh. You plan to paralyze entire civilizations, worlds that depend on advanced technology for everything from transport to food production. Billions would die. And billions of humans would die if the Council decided we were a threat to be neutralized, Chen countered, finally allowing a touch of emotion to color her words. Commander Thexalar, how long have you had probes observing our world? 200 years? 300? During all that time, did anyone on the Council consider contacting us, offering us knowledge, partnership, entry into the galactic community? Thexalar had no answer. The truth was that Level 2 species were considered too primitive for direct contact. Official policy was non-interventionist observation until they reached sufficient development for independent interstellar travel. It was a sensible policy, designed to protect less developed cultures from cultural shock, or so they justified it. Your silence is eloquent, Chen observed. She gestured to one of the nearby operators. Lieutenant Park, bring up the archive images, please. File Delta 771. A new hologram materialized above one of the consoles. Thexalar immediately recognized the shapes and markings. It was a Council reconnaissance probe, identical to those his own fleet regularly deployed. The image showed the probe being pulled into a primitive space facility surrounded by humans in clumsy, pressurized suits. 15 years ago, Chen narrated, the International Space Station detected an approaching object that did not correspond to any known launch. At the time, we had limited space capability, a few orbital stations, telescopes, communication satellites. It took us 3 months to organize an interception mission. The image changed, showing human technicians working on the captured probe. Even through the hologram, Thexalar could see the excitement on their faces, the way their hands trembled touching technology that was centuries beyond what they knew. When we finally opened that probe and discovered what it contained, the world changed, Chen continued. Not just the confirmation that we weren't alone, but the proof that we were being watched, studied, catalogued as specimens in a cosmic zoo. The Council does not interfere with developing species, Thexalar protested. It is fundamental protocol. Not interfering is a choice, Chen countered. A choice you made for us, without our knowledge or consent. But let me ask you, Commander, how many Level 2 species have been contacted by hostile forces before the Council intervened? How many were enslaved, exploited, or extinguished while you watched from afar, waiting for them to reach some arbitrary development threshold? The question hit like a physical projectile. Thexalar knew the answer. There were at least 17 documented cases in the last 10,000 cycles, promising species extinguished or subjugated by predatory powers before they could claim their place among the stars. The Council always lamented such losses, but maintained its policy of non-intervention. We couldn't risk it, Chen said, interpreting his silence correctly. When your probe told us there was a galactic civilization out there, but that it had chosen to ignore us, we had to assume the worst. That perhaps you were waiting until we were advanced enough to be worth conquering, or that something worse was out there and you simply didn't care if we found ourselves unprepared. She began to walk along the command room, passing between the operators who worked with silent efficiency. Thexalar and his team followed her, escorted by the human guards. So we did what humanity has always done when confronted with the unknown and the terrifying, Chen continued. We adapted, we united, and we became dangerous. A new set of holograms appeared, showing scenes that chilled Thexalar's blood. Factories the size of cities, producing ship components on an industrial scale. Training centers where thousands of humans practiced zero-gravity combat. Underground laboratories where scientists worked on technologies that seemed to have been ripped directly from the Council's most classified files. In 7 months, Chen reported, we reverse-engineered your quantum stealth technology. In 1 year, we had developed functional warp drives based on principles we extracted from the probe's propulsion systems. In 3 years, we launched our first warship, capable of interstellar operations. In 5 years, we had a complete defense fleet. Impossible, Rhythm repeated, but his voice was weak. The resources needed, the coordination, the scientific knowledge. We redirected 23% of the global economic product to the effort, Chen explained. All nations on Earth, all corporations, all scientific resources were mobilized. We shut down social programs, postponed infrastructure projects, sacrificed comfort and luxury, because when you discover you are alone in a dark forest full of predators, you stop worrying about which house to build and start sharpening spears. Thexalar watched the holograms showing the evolution of human military capability. It was terrifying in its speed. What should have taken millennia had been compressed into just over a decade. But more than that, it was the scale. Humans hadn't built a few experimental ships. They had industrialized space warfare. Commander Chen, he said carefully, I understand your perspective. Truly, but surely you must understand that the Council will view this as an existential threat. You armed a primitive species with technology it barely comprehends, spread weapons throughout the galaxy, and now demand recognition. This can only end in conflict. Chen stopped before a massive observation window that looked out onto the void of space. Beyond it, Earth shone like a blue and white jewel, suspended against the infinite darkness. That's where you're wrong, Commander, she said softly. We comprehend the technology perfectly, better than you in some ways, because we had to learn fast, without the luxury of centuries of incremental development. And as for conflict, she turned to face him directly. The Council can try to destroy us. You have the fleets, the resources, the experience of millennia, but you will lose. Not because we are stronger, but because we are prepared to pay a price that you are not. What price? Vess asked, her voice barely a whisper. Everything, Chen replied simply. You fight to protect your civilization, your culture, your way of life. We fight to exist, and a species fighting for survival knows no limits. We will deactivate every piece of advanced technology in the galaxy. If necessary, we will turn this region of space into a technological desert. And then, when everyone is reduced to the same level, we will find out who really knows how to survive. The weight of her words settled over the group like increased gravity. Thexala looked at the holograms, at Earth beyond the window, at the humans around them, working with silent determination. But, Chen continued, her voice softening, that is not what we want. We didn't spend 15 years preparing for war because we love conflict. We prepared because it was the only rational choice when confronted with the unknown. Now, we are offering an alternative. What alternative? Thexala asked. Chen smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Partnership, recognition, a seat at the galactic table, not as observers or client species, but as equals. We will repair your ships, provide navigation coordinates for safe return to Council space, and send a diplomatic delegation with you. And the suppression devices? They remain in place, Chen said firmly. As insurance, as a guarantee that any agreement made will be honored. But if the Council agrees to recognize us as a sovereign species, if they opened a trade and dialogue, if they give us access to the wonders of the galactic community that they denied us for so long. She paused. Then eventually perhaps we can discuss mutual disarmament. Thexala processed this. It was blackmail, certainly, but it was also pragmatic. Humans had achieved in 15 years what had taken the Council millennia. They had demonstrated the capacity not only to match advanced technology, but to innovate beyond it. And more importantly, they had demonstrated a unity of purpose that few mature species still possessed. The Council will never accept this, Artham said. You are asking us to rewrite millennia of diplomatic protocol. Then the Council is invited to try to force us, Chen replied. But before they make that decision, I suggest they carefully contemplate how many of their member species would truly survive if all advanced technology suddenly stopped working. One of the operators called Chen's attention. She listened briefly through an implanted communicator, then turned back to Thexala. Commander, your ships have been repaired and refueled. Our medical team is available should anyone in your crew require attention after the stress of the apprehension. And our chief ambassador, Dr. James Okonkwo, is waiting to accompany you back to Council space, with your permission, of course. Thexala looked at his team, saw the fear and confusion on their faces, and made the decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. Admiral Chen, he said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council Reconnaissance Fleet, I accept your offer of repairs, refueling, and diplomatic transport. And personally, although I cannot speak for the Council, I recognize that humanity has earned the right to be heard. Chen inclined her head respectfully. That is all we ask, Commander. A chance to be heard. A chance to prove we deserve a place among the stars. As they were escorted back to the hangars, Thexala couldn't resist one last question. Admiral, may I ask something personal? Of course. Would you really do it? Deactivate all advanced technology even knowing it would condemn billions on both sides. Chen stopped, looked at him with those predatory eyes of an evolved primate, and answered with absolute honesty. Commander, my species evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us. Predators, diseases, even the weather conspired against us. And we didn't just survive, we thrived. We conquered every continent, every environment, from the Arctic to the deserts. We did it without claws, without fangs, without natural armor. We did it with intelligence, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to accept extinction. She paused. So yes, if it's a choice between the survival of humanity and the preservation of galactic civilization as it exists now, we will choose survival. Every time. Without hesitation. And Thexalar, observing the cold determination in her eyes, completely believed her. The return journey to Council space took 17 standard days. Enough time for Thexalar to contemplate the impossibility of his situation and reach some uncomfortable conclusions about the nature of civilization, power, and survival. His 6 ships, now accompanied by a human escort of 4 heavy destroyers, traversed the interstellar vacuum in precise formation. Dr. James Okonkwo, the human ambassador designated for the first official contact with the Galactic Council, spent most of his time aboard the VXN 447, ostensibly to facilitate communication and cultural understanding. In practice, Thexalar suspected the human was there to ensure no attempt at sabotage or deception occurred during the trip. Onkwo was different from Admiral Chen, where she was military to the core, projecting controlled strength and relentless determination. The ambassador exhibited genuine charisma and intellectual curiosity. He was older than Chen, grey hair cut short, dark skin marked by expression lines that suggested a life spent smiling. But Thexalar had learned not to underestimate humans based on appearances. Commander, Okonkwo said, during the 6th day, finding Thexalar in the ship's observatory, "May I join you?" Thexalar gestured affirmatively. The human slid into the seat beside him, his movements surprisingly graceful for a species that had evolved under relatively high planetary gravity. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Okonkwo commented, looking at the stellar expanse beyond the windows. "I spent my entire life studying the stars through telescopes, writing theories about what might exist out there. I never imagined I would live to travel among them." "How old are you?" Thexalar asked. If it's not offensive to ask. 68 Earth Standard Years, Okonkwo replied. About 3/4 of the average human life expectancy, although with recent medical advances, who knows, I might live to see 100. Thexalar did the calculations mentally. The human had spent more than 2/3 of his life waiting for this moment. "Did you study the possibility of alien life before contact?" "I was an astrobiologist for 40 years, Okonkwo confirmed. "I specialized in calculating probabilities of intelligent life, potential environments where it might evolve, possible methods of communication. When the Council probe was captured, I was among the first civilian scientists called in to analyze it." "It must have been gratifying," Thexalar observed, "to have your life's work validated so dramatically." Onkwo laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "Gratifying? Commander, I nearly had a heart attack, literally. They gave me sedatives for the first 48 hours because my cardiovascular system couldn't handle the excitement and the terror." "Terror?" "Of course," Okonkwo said, his expression becoming more serious. "Discovering we are not alone is wonderful. discovering we have been observed without our knowledge by vastly superior civilizations who chose not to make contact, who catalogued us as too primitive to deserve recognition. He shook his head. That planted seeds of paranoia that we are still dealing with. Thexelar felt a pang of something that might be guilt. The policy of non-interference was designed to protect less developed species, to prevent cultural shock, exploitation, domination by more advanced civilizations. I understand the logic, Okonkwo said. Truly. But Commander, let me offer a human perspective. Imagine you discover that your family, your loved ones, have been observed by powerful neighbors for generations. These neighbors never introduced themselves, never offered help when you struggled, never shared knowledge that could have saved lives. And when you finally discover them, they justify it by saying it was for your own good. Thexelar had no immediate answer. Presented this way, the Council's policy seemed less like protection and more like paternalistic neglect. Furthermore, Okonkwo continued, there is the practical issue. Your policy assumes that primitive species are safe being left alone. But what if they are not? What if predators arrive before we are ready? Does the Council intervene then? Or watch from afar while we are conquered? There are precedents, Thexelar admitted reluctantly. Not all favorable. Exactly. So when we discovered that the Council existed but had chosen to ignore us, we couldn't risk that your intentions were benign, or that if other threats appeared, you would care enough to intervene. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Finally, Thexelar asked the question that had been bothering him since they left Terran space. Dr. Okonkwo, Admiral Chen said, humanity reverse-engineered our technology in 7 months, developed warp drives in 1 year, built a war fleet in 5 years. How? I don't question your species' intelligence, but the conceptual leaps required, the infrastructure, the global coordination. He paused. It is statistically impossible. Onkwo smiled, but there was sadness in the corners. Commander, are you familiar with the concept of evolutionary pressure? Of course. Environmental stress that forces rapid adaptation or extinction. Exactly. Well, the discovery that we were being observed by advanced alien civilizations was the greatest evolutionary pressure humanity has ever faced. And we responded the only way we know how. We united and became dangerous. He leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. You see, Commander, humanity has a unique characteristic. When confronted with existential threats, something changes in our collective psychology. Differences that seemed insurmountable become trivial. Rivalries that lasted centuries evaporate. Because deep down, on an instinctive level, we understand that we either survive together or perish separately. But the speed of development, it was bought with sacrifice you probably cannot comprehend. Okonkwo interrupted gently. We redirected 23% of the global economy, yes, but that's just numbers. The reality is that we closed hospitals to build space docks. We cancelled poverty relief programs to fund weapons research. We sent our brightest young people, not to universities, but to military academies. His voice lowered. We lost freedoms we considered fundamental: privacy, autonomy, the right to pursue individual happiness instead of collective survival. For 15 years, humanity essentially functioned as a society on a total war footing, and we paid the price. But you succeeded, Thexelar observed. We succeeded, Okonkwo agreed, Because when humans are pushed to the extreme, when survival is at stake, we become something terrifying. Not because we are naturally violent, although we have the capacity for violence, but because we absolutely refuse to accept defeat. He gestured to the stars beyond the window. You see that constellation there? On Earth? We call it Orion. An ancient legend tells of a hunter so proud he challenged the gods. As punishment, he was placed in the sky, condemned to eternally hunt prey he could never reach. A fable about hubris, Thexelar interpreted. Perhaps, Okonkwo said, but also about perseverance, about refusing to stop even when defeat is certain. That is the human essence, Commander. We are not the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest species, but we are, without a doubt, the most stubborn. A soft alert sounded through the ship's systems. Artham appeared in the observatory. Commander, we are approaching the jump point to Council space. The human escort ships are requesting permission to accompany us across the border. Thexelar and Okonkwo exchanged glances. This would be the critical moment. Human military ships crossing into Council territory for the first time. Depending on how the Defense Forces reacted, it could be the start of dialogue or the trigger for conflict. Grant permission, Thexelar said, and transmit ahead to Border Command. Inform them that we are returning with diplomatic guests and that the situation requires urgent attention from the High Council. Yes, Commander. When they were alone again, Thexelar looked at the human ambassador. Dr. Okonkwo, may I offer some unofficial advice? Please. The Council is composed of species that have governed the galaxy for millennia. They are proud, set in their ways, and slow to change. When you present yourself before them, there will be those who see humanity as a threat to be neutralized, others who see you as primitives presuming above your station. Very few will be inclined to accept your demands. I understand, Okonkwo said calmly. My advice is this: don't threaten. Admiral Chen might rely on force to make her point, but in a diplomatic setting, threats will only solidify opposition. Instead, appeal to self-interest. Show the Council what they stand to gain. By accepting humanity as a partner, rather than antagonizing us. Okonkwo considered this, then smiled. Commander Thexelar, may I make a confession? Of course. I was chosen for this mission not just for my scientific expertise, but because I spent 30 years as a diplomat before returning to academic research. I negotiated treaties between terrestrial nations that had hated each other for centuries. I mediated disputes over resources, territory, and rights. His eyes twinkled with humor. I know exactly how to present our position to the Council, and you are absolutely right. Threats would be counterproductive. Then what do you plan? To offer them something they can't refuse, Okonkwo said enigmatically. Commander, in your decades of service, how many truly revolutionary new technologies have been developed by Council species? Thexelar thought. Incremental advances are common, but truly revolutionary? Perhaps once or twice a century? Exactly. Mature civilizations become established. Innovation slows, but humanity, driven by desperate necessity, compressed centuries of development into 15 years. In the process, we stumbled upon discoveries we didn't even know we were looking for. He leaned closer, his voice low. Quantum cloaking field detection, targeted technological suppression, novel methods of antimatter manipulation, warp drive propulsion more efficient than the Council's current models, and a dozen other innovations we will develop if given time and resources. You will offer technology in exchange for recognition, Thexalar realized. We won't just offer it, Okonkwo corrected. We will propose a research partnership. Humans bring fresh perspectives, a willingness to experiment, and the capacity to innovate rapidly. The Council brings deep knowledge, vast resources, and established infrastructure. Together, we could advance galactic science more in one decade than has occurred in the last millennium. And if the Council refuses, Onkwo's expression hardened slightly, then they will confirm our worst fears, that they see us not as potential partners, but as threats to be controlled or eliminated. And in that case, he left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. The ship trembled slightly as it initiated the jump sequence into hyperspace. Through the windows, normal space began to distort, stars stretching into lines of light as they penetrated the barrier between dimensions. Commander, Okonkwo said quietly, I appreciate your honesty. And your counsel. I would like to believe that when intelligent species meet, reason will prevail over fear. But I have learned that is rarely guaranteed. Not always, Thexalar agreed, but perhaps this time, with the stakes so high, we have enough motivation to try. The jump completed, and they emerged into council space. Immediately, alerts filled the bridge as border sensors detected the human vessels. Here we go, Okonkwo murmured, straightening his formal attire. The first day of the rest of galactic history. Thexalar could not disagree. The High Galactic Council station floated in geostationary orbit above Nexara Prime, the capital world where representatives from 417 member species conducted the affairs of interstellar civilization. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a 310-mile-wide ring structure with sections rotating at different speeds to accommodate the gravitational preferences of various species. Thexalar had been here only 3 times in his career, always for routine debriefings on reconnaissance missions. He had never imagined returning as the bearer of news that could shake the foundations of the galactic order. The High Council chamber was a massive amphitheater designed to intimidate. Galleries rose in concentric tiers, each equipped with customized environments for different physiologies. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched from adapted seating, some breathing exotic atmospheres through containment fields, others immersed in fluid tanks or suspended in adjusted gravitational fields. In the center, beneath the transparent dome that revealed the stars beyond, was the witness podium. Thexalar occupied this space now, with Dr. Okonkwo at his side. The human ambassador looked small and fragile compared to the representatives of larger species, but he carried himself with calm dignity. Premier Counselor Eth Serra, an ancient luminary whose crystalline form refracted light in hypnotic patterns, presided from an elevated throne. Her voice resonated through neural translators at frequencies spanning 17 sensory spectra. Commander Thexalar, she began, complex harmonies of light accompanying her words. Your preliminary report was disturbing. You allege that a Tier 2 species not only detected quantum cloaking technology, but replicated and surpassed our best systems in less than 2 local decades. It is not an allegation, Premier, Thexalar replied respectfully. It is documented fact. My team verified it independently. Human technological capabilities are real and substantial. Murmurs swept through the galleries. A Veldari representative, General Craxton, rose. His carapace was adorned with battle marks from 10,000 cycles of military service. "If this is true," he thundered, "then we face an unprecedented violation of sovereign space, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and open threats against Council's species. I demand immediate military action." Cries of approval echoed from several sections, but other voices rose in protest, creating a cacophony that took several minutes for Ithsera to silence. "Dr. Okonkwo," the Premier turned her attention to the human. "You requested an opportunity to address this council. Speak now and choose your words carefully. Much depends upon them." Onkwo stepped forward. To his credit, his voice did not tremble as he began to speak. "Premier Councillor, honored members of the High Council, I am James Okonkwo, representing the people of Earth and the human species. I come not as a conqueror or a threat, but as one seeking understanding and partnership." "Partnership?" General Craxton spat. "You plant war devices across the civilized galaxy and speak of partnership." "General," Okonkwo replied calmly, "let me ask you a question. If you woke up one day and discovered your home was being watched by powerful strangers that they had been observing for generations without introducing themselves, what decision would you make? Would you trust their intentions were benign? Or would you take precautions? The Council's policy of non-interference is your policy," Okonkwo interrupted, "made without our knowledge or consent. You decided we were too primitive for contact, too undeveloped to merit recognition, and perhaps by your standards, we were. But that decision had consequences." He gestured to the void beyond the dome. 15 Earth years ago, we discovered we were not alone. That advanced civilizations existed, but had chosen to ignore us. And we confronted a choice: wait passively for you to deem us worthy, or ensure that when contact finally occurred, it would be on equal terms. A Cathrax representative, Councillor Vesika, leaned forward. Her antennae vibrated with curiosity. "You speak of equality, yet you threaten destruction if you don't get what you want. That is blackmail, not diplomacy." "With respect, Councillor," Okonkwo said, "it is not blackmail to establish deterrence, it is pragmatism. The suppression devices we installed exist to ensure humanity is not casually eliminated because some nervous general decides we are too inconvenient." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But more importantly, they exist as a guarantee of any agreement we make. If the Council recognizes Earth as a sovereign species, if you open trade and dialogue, if you grant us access to the knowledge you have guarded, then eventually those devices can be deactivated, because we will have built mutual trust." "And if we refuse?" Ithsera asked. "Then you will confirm our worst fears," Okonkwo said simply. "That you see us not as intelligent life worthy of respect, but as a problem to be managed or eliminated. And in that case, yes, we will use every means at our disposal to ensure survival." A heavy silence descended upon the chamber. Finally, a new voice spoke. It was Sage Theron, an ancient ethereal whose consciousness existed partially in overlapping quantum states, allowing him to perceive probabilities and potential futures. The threatening child speaks uncomfortable truths. The sage's voice echoed from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I have observed humanity through the veil of time. I have seen their potential futures branch into infinite possibilities. In some paths, they become the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. In others, our greatest allies. It all depends on choices made now in this moment. You suggest capitulation? Craxton demanded. I suggest wisdom, Theron replied. General, you built a career on military strength, but war against the humans would not be the clean victory you imagine. Even if we destroyed their fleet, killed their homeworld, their suppression devices would still remain. And in the chaos that followed, how many council species would survive? The sage floated closer to the central podium. But beyond pragmatic calculation, there is a moral question. We erred with them. Our policy of non-interference, though well-intentioned, created a paranoid species that views the galaxy as a threat. We owe it to them, and to ourselves, to try another path. Ithsera pulsed in thoughtful patterns. Dr. Okonkwo, you spoke of partnership. Be specific. What exactly does humanity offer in exchange for recognition? This was the moment. Okonkwo reached into his diplomatic satchel and removed a small device. As he activated it, holograms materialized above the podium, displaying technical schematics and complex data. This, he said, is a fifth-generation warp drive engine. Our engineers developed it 6 months ago. It is 37% more efficient than current council models, requires 40% less antimatter, and can maintain warp speeds for 50% longer periods. Murmurs of interest swept through the galleries. Vesica leaned over her controls, analyzing the data. That should not be possible. The fundamental principles were re-examined without the biases of millennia of established practice. Okonkwo explained, when you need to develop technology rapidly, you don't have the luxury of following orthodoxy. Our scientists approached problems from angles you never considered because you never needed to. Another hologram appeared. This is a biological life support recycling system that reduces resource consumption on space stations by 60%. This is a quantum sensor array that can detect warp signatures at distances 3 times greater than your best systems. This is a method of antimatter synthesis that cut our production costs in half. He continued presenting innovation after innovation, each representing a genuine leap forward over existing council technology. The audience watched with growing fascination and discomfort. We do not offer simply to give these technologies to you, Okonkwo concluded. We propose a research partnership, joint laboratories where human and council scientists work together. Human scientists bring fresh perspectives and a willingness to experiment. You bring depth of knowledge and resources that would take us decades to replicate. How much progress could be made? Councillor Vesica murmured. If we combined approaches, exactly, Okonkwo agreed. But more than that, we offer something no council species can. A reminder of urgency. Your civilizations are mature, stable, perhaps complacent. Ours is young, desperate, innovating, because we must. That energy, directed productively instead of defensively, could benefit everyone. Ithsera pulsed in contemplative patterns. Members of the council, I open formal debate. Representative Craxton, you argue for military action. The Veldari general rose, his presence imposing even among galactic giants. Premier, military action would be a disaster. Sage Theron is correct on that point, but ceding completely sets a dangerous precedent. What other primitive species will decide to threaten the Council to force recognition? Then what solution do you propose? Vasika asked. Conditional recognition, Craxton said after a moment of reflection. We accept Earth as a sovereign species. We open diplomatic relations and limited trade. But the suppression devices must be deactivated within a defined period, 5 standard cycles, and humans must accept Council observers on their world to ensure compliance with galactic law. Unacceptable, Okonkwo said firmly. We will not remove our sole guarantee of security until genuine trust is established. As for observers, we accept in principle, but it must be mutual. Humans also place observers on Council worlds. Debate erupted, arguments flying in dozens of languages and frequencies. Thexalar watched, fascinated, as a power structure that had existed for millennia struggled to adapt to the impossible reality the humans had created. Finally, after hours of discussion, Ithsera called for silence. I propose a compromise, she announced. Earth is recognized as a sovereign species with full Council membership rights. Trade and scientific exchange are opened immediately. A research partnership will be established for an experimental period of 10 standard cycles. She paused. In exchange, humanity agrees to remove half of its suppression devices within 20 cycles. The remaining half will be deactivated within 50 cycles, a period during which peaceful relations must be demonstrated. Observers will be exchanged as Dr. Okonkwo suggested, and most importantly, her crystallizations pulsed gravely. Humans will agree not to share suppression technology with species external to the Council without the unanimous approval of the High Council. This technology is too dangerous for uncontrolled proliferation. Okonkwo exchanged a look with Thexalar. The commander gave a slight nod of encouragement. Premier Councillor, Okonkwo said carefully, I am authorized to accept these terms on behalf of Earth, with one addition. Any attempt by any Council species to attack or subjugate Earth or human colonies results in the automatic activation of all remaining devices. No warning, no negotiation. Agreed, Ithsera said. Let it be recorded. On this day, the species known as humanity is recognized as a full member of the Galactic Council. Applause echoed through the chamber, though not universally. Some representatives remained in silent disapproval, but the majority recognized that a compromise had been reached. When the formal session ended, Thexalar met Okonkwo in the waiting chambers. You did it, he said simply. We did it, Okonkwo corrected. Your testimony, your honesty about the failures of Council policy carried significant weight. What happens now? Okonkwo smiled. Now, the hard work truly begins. Building trust, establishing protocols, teaching 2 radically different civilizations how to work together. He paused. But for the first time since we discovered that probe, I feel hope. Real hope that humans can find a place among the stars, not through threats, but through genuine contribution. Through the station windows, Earth shone distant, a small blue dot in infinite void. But no longer alone, no longer ignored. Finally, after 200,000 years evolving on one hostile planet, humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 standard months had passed since the Galactic Council recognized Earth as a sovereign species. Thexalar was now aboard Joint Research Station Hope, a massive facility in Earth's lunar orbit, serving as the Director of Operations for the Scientific Exchange Program. The name had been chosen carefully, a word that existed in virtually every known language, representing the same fundamental concept: belief in better futures. It was appropriate, Thexelar thought, watching through the command center windows as human and alien scientists worked side by side in the laboratories below. "Commander," a familiar voice called him. Dr. Okonkwo approached, now bearing the title of Earth's permanent ambassador to the Council. 6 months had added a few extra lines around his eyes, but also a gleam of satisfaction. "Do you have a moment?" "Always, Ambassador," Thexelar replied. They had developed genuine respect during the months working together. "There's something I want to show you," Okonkwo said, guiding him toward one of the research labs. "Something I believe you will appreciate." The lab was busy with a mixed team. A human engineer named Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the Admiral, was working with Vesika, the Kethrax counselor who had become an enthusiastic proponent of human collaboration. Together, they were calibrating what appeared to be a miniature warp drive engine. "This," Okonkwo explained with obvious pride, "is the result of true collaboration. Fundamental principles of Council warp technology, combined with human innovations in antimatter containment and gravitational field manipulation. The result is an engine that is 62% more efficient than anything that existed 6 months ago." "Impressive," Thexelar admitted, "but that is just technology, material progress." "True," Okonkwo agreed, "but look at who is making the progress. Kethrax and humans working as colleagues, sharing meals, trading jokes, debating theory late into the night. 6 months ago, this scene would have been unthinkable." Thexelar watched the two scientists laugh at something on a shared monitor, their physiological differences becoming irrelevant in the face of shared scientific enthusiasm. He was right. This was more significant than any technological breakthrough. "We received a report from the Council today," Okonkwo continued, his voice growing more serious. "The first wave of suppression devices has been deactivated as agreed. 23% of the total. And nothing happened," Okonkwo said simply. "No sudden invasion. No attempt to exploit a temporary vulnerability. The Council honored their agreement, and we honored ours." "Trust starts small," Thexelar observed. "Yes, but it grows with every promise kept, every agreement honored." Okonkwo gestured to the laboratories around them. "There are 347 scientists working on this station now, representing 23 different species. Last month, they produced 7 publishable breakthroughs. Last week, 3 interspecies couples formed romantic partnerships, something galactic anthropologists consider a key indicator of genuine cultural integration." Thexelar felt something that might have been amusement. "You track romance statistics?" "We track everything," Okonkwo replied with a smile. "But yes, personal relationships matter. When people from different species start seeing each other as individuals instead of categories, when they form friendships, and yes, romances, the foundations for prejudice crumble. They walk together through the station corridors, passing habitation zones where members of dozens of species had created small spaces of home away from home. A human chef was teaching culinary techniques to a curious Veldari. A group of young Kethrax watched an Earth action movie, their antennae vibrating with excitement during the chase scenes. "You know," Thexelar said thoughtfully, "when we first detected your fleet, my immediate fear was that humans represented an existential threat, an aggressive, expansionist species that had broken all norms of expected development. And now I see that the real danger was never human aggression, Thexalar replied. It was the Council's complacency. Millennia of success made us arrogant, convinced that our way was the only way. Humans forced us to confront that arrogance. They reached the main observation section, where massive windows offered a view of Earth below and the Moon beyond. In the vacuum between them, constant activity was visible. Council and human ships on joint patrols, research stations orbiting in carefully negotiated formations. The beginning of real integration. Ambassador Okonkwo, a young human officer, approached, looking nervous. Apologies for the interruption, but there is an urgent transmission from the High Council. Okonkwo and Thexalar exchanged glances and followed the officer to the secure communications room. The hologram that materialized showed Premier Councillor Ithsera. Her crystallizations pulsing in patterns Thexalar had learned to recognize as controlled urgency. Ambassador Okonkwo, Commander Thexalar, she began without preliminaries. A situation has developed that requires a joint response. Early warning systems detected unusual activity in peripheral sector Delta. Energy signatures do not match any known Council technology. First incursion? Okonkwo asked, referring to the extragalactic entities that occasionally tested Council defenses. Possibly, or something new, entirely. Ithsera paused. We are assembling a mixed response fleet, Council and Terran ships, integrated crews, shared command. It will be the first real test of our alliance under potentially hostile conditions. Thexalar felt a ripple of apprehension. Premier, with respect, coordination between fleets requires extensive training. Simply mixing crews? It is already done, Ithsera interrupted. Mixed teams have been training together for the past 3 months. A secret protocol in case precisely this situation arose. Commander, you have been requested to serve as the liaison officer aboard the UNS Indomitable for this mission. Admiral Chen's ship. Of course. Thexalar looked at Okonkwo, who nodded encouragement. Understood, Premier. When do we depart? 12 hours. The Indomitable is refueling now. Ambassador Okonkwo will accompany you as well as a civilian observer. Ithsera paused. Commander, Ambassador, this mission is more than a tactical response. It is a demonstration to the Council, to other galactic powers, and to ourselves that humans and established species can function as true allies when it matters. We will not fail, Okonkwo said simply. 12 hours later, Thexalar was again on the bridge of the Indomitable, but under drastically different circumstances. This time, he was not a prisoner, but a partner. Around him, a mixed crew worked with surprising efficiency. Human officers coordinated with Cuthrax, Veldari, and Luminar, each bringing their unique strengths to the ship's operations. Admiral Chen occupied the command chair, but beside her sat co-commander Riketh, a veteran Veldari, whom Thexalar knew by reputation. The choice of shared command was symbolic, but important. Mixed fleet, formed and ready. The tactical officer reported. He was human, but his station was shared with a Kethrax navigator. 7 Council vessels, 5 Terran, integrated weapons and sensor configurations. Excellent, Chen said. Co-Commander Riketh, your thoughts on approach? Caution is advised, the Veldari replied. We enter with sensors at maximum, shields raised, but weapons on cold standby. We show strength, but not aggression. Agreed, Chen activated fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Prepare for coordinated jump to Sector Delta. Maintain dispersed formation. Be ready for evasive action. Our objective is investigation, not confrontation. But if threatened, we will respond with full force. Good luck, everyone. Chen out. The jump to hyperspace was smooth, the new generation warp drive making the transition almost imperceptible. Thexalar used the transit time to review sensor data with Okonkwo. Whatever we are facing, he observed, it is not the typical invasion attempts of the first incursion. Energy signatures are far more sophisticated. Agreed, Okonkwo murmured, analyzing patterns. It almost looks exploratory, probes, perhaps, or reconnaissance drones. Like the probe that led to all this, Thexalar said, with irony. The irony would be poetic, Okonkwo admitted. We encounter another species doing exactly what the Council did to us. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Immediately, sensors began sweeping the sector. What they found made Thexalar arch his auditory membranes in surprise. Multiple contacts, the tactical officer announced. Count, 23 discrete objects. Sizes range from 10 meters to 3 kilometers. Unknown configurations. They are not showing hostility, but are also not responding to hails. On screen, Chen ordered. The main display showed objects that defied easy categorization. They were not ships in the conventional sense, but organic structures that looked grown rather than built. Surfaces glowed with pulsing bioluminescence. There were no obvious thrusters, yet they moved with purpose through the vacuum. Biological analysis, Vesika, now serving as the science officer, called from her station, detecting life signatures, not mechanical. These are living beings, space creatures. Impossible, Riketh began, but stopped as the objects began to shift formation, clearly reacting to the fleet's presence. Transmitting hail on all channels and frequencies, the communications officer reported. No response yet. Then, something extraordinary happened. The largest of the creature ships began to glow more intensely, patterns of light dancing across its surface in complex sequences. Wait, Okonkwo said suddenly. That's not random. It's language, mathematics. They are transmitting sequences of prime numbers. First contact protocol, Chen ordered immediately. Respond with the same sequence. Show them we understand. Tense minutes followed as basic communication was established. Eventually, more complex patterns emerged. The space creatures, as they came to be called, were a highly advanced species that had evolved in the interstellar vacuum, never knowing planetary gravity. They had been exploring this region of the galaxy, completely unaware of the civilizations that existed on worlds around them. Two intelligent groups, Okonkwo observed in wonder, evolving so close, yet never meeting because our existences were so radically different. Over the next few hours, careful contact was established. The space creatures were peaceful, curious, and just as surprised to find planet-based life as the Council species were to find them. And through it all, the mixed fleet of humans and Council species functioned flawlessly. Human linguists worked with Kethrax mathematicians to decipher communication patterns. Veldari biologists coordinated with Terran medics to understand alien physiology. Diplomats from half a dozen species collaborated on first contact protocols. When they finally returned to Station Hope, it was with an open invitation for the space creatures to visit and learn more about planetary civilizations, and a reciprocal invitation for Council scientists to study life in the deep vacuum. In the debriefing room, Thexelar found himself standing next to Okonkwo, observing the preliminary reports. "You know," the ambassador said quietly, "when we discovered that probe 15 years ago, it felt like the end of the world as we knew it. And it was. But it was also the beginning of something we never could have imagined. Genuine collaboration between radically different species." Thexelar agreed. "Not just tolerance or coexistence, but real synergy." "And the complete irony," Okonkwo added, with a smile, "we prepared for war, built weapons capable of paralyzing an entire galaxy, became dangerous beyond any previous measure of our species. And we discovered that our greatest strength was not our capacity to destroy, but our capacity to collaborate. Your species continues to surprise," Thexelar admitted. "But perhaps the real lesson is for all of us, that when we choose partnership over paranoia, when we work together instead of alone, possibilities expand infinitely." Okonkwo extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thexelar accepted, his claws delicately holding the human's fragile yet strong hand. "To better futures," Okonkwo said. "To hope," Thexelar replied. And through the station windows, Earth and the Moon shone together, no longer alone in the vast void, surrounded by ships from dozens of worlds, part of a galactic community that was only just beginning to grasp its true potential. Humanity had arrived at the stars not as conquerors, but as catalysts. And the galaxy, forced to confront its own complacencies and prejudices, was transforming into something greater than it had been before. This, Thexelar realized, was the true meaning of HFY. Not humanity, fuck yeah, in the sense of martial superiority, but in the recognition that sometimes a single stubborn species, refusing to accept its prescribed place in the universe, can elevate everyone around it. End of story.